In today's video, I'm going to be talking about sketchbooks. Now, sketchbooks are one thing that I love working in. I work on canvases as well. I work on also, other pads of paper, but I love working in a sketchbook. So I've been working in sketchbooks over the past couple of years, and over those years, I've purchased the ones that I really like, and I found my favorites. And I found different reasons for using those sketchbooks. Now, I just want to mention that I'm not sponsored by any of these brands. I purchased these sketchbooks, tested them out, tried them out, and I like them. And that's why I'm discussing them today. And also, these are not the only sketchbooks or brands that are available. There are tons of sketchbooks available in the market. I have just picked these ones, although there are some really good brands out there that I would like to try one day. But for now, these are the ones that I use. Now, I'm also going to mention that you don't need to have multiple sketchbooks. However, I do have multiple sketchbooks because I am a professional artist. I am constantly making art content, and I work with multiple mediums, and I draw and paint all different subjects. So for me, it's important to have different sketchbooks because of the paper, and that can accommodate me for the different mediums that I'm using. Now, I'm going to explain all of that as we go on with the video, but now I do use other pads of paper. Like, for example, I use watercolor paper and, mixed media paper, any other pads of paper. But these I usually have as individual sheets that I remove from the pads and I do my artwork on. I'm not going to be talking about any of that. I'm only going to be talking about sketchbooks that have a book and that the pages don't get removed from the book. It stays as one book. And that's what I'm going to be discussing today. Because having a sketchbook is of such a wonderful feeling. I've been keeping sketchbooks for years and I've been filling them up, and it's been such a exciting, fulfilling feeling when you complete one, and then you can page through it and just see what you've created and how you've grown and how you've improved. And sometimes even going back to the sketchbooks can help you think of new ideas for new artwork. So I really love having sketchbooks, and that I can go back and look at my sketchbooks. Now I will show you a little later the sketchbooks I've got on my shelf. There are a couple of them that I've completed already, but I'm not going to go through them, but I'll just show you a clip of all of my sketchbooks. But yeah, sketchbooks are really something that I really enjoy using. So I think it's important for me to just do a video that can help others to see what sketchbooks there are available, and maybe what you could use them for and what I use them for. So I'm giving you my opinion. You can use them however you want, but these are just my opinions of how I would use them and how I do use them. So let me clear this up, and then we're going to get into today's video. Okay, so getting into the first sketchbook. Now, this is a new sketchbook that I've tried out. This is the Potate brand. It's a watercolor sketchbook, 300 GSM cold press paper. Now, when it comes to sketchbooks or any paper in general, you get for watercolor paper, you get hot press and you get cold press. Now, cold press is a more textured paper, and hot press is a more smoother paper. So this is a more textured paper, and this paper is one that I don't normally use. But when I purchased this sketchbook, I just wanted to try out a new paper and see how it works. And I actually love working with cold press paper because it adds so much more texture to my final artwork. And I just recently started working with this sketchbook, so I haven't done a lot of art in it, but I really enjoyed working with the cold press paper. Now, hot press paper is a more smoother paper, and that can have a more smoother finish and not have that textured look to your final paintings and drawings. But either one I do find to work very good. I mean, I only used hot press before, but I'm really enjoying cold press as well. So this sketchbook is a square format. Now, the formats you get are your square, your landscape, and portrait. Now, with the square format, this format of sketchbook, I've realized there are some challenges with it. Now, with this particular sketchbook, with this spiral rings in the middle, these rings do cause a bit of an issue for me. And what it does is, I do like to work sometimes in a full spread, but having these in between and having the pages separate where they don't touch one another, it does cause a problem with me doing full spreads. So this particular kind of sketchbook, firstly, because it's a square, I'm going to have to do compositions that are able to be done on a square format. So it could be maybe still lifes, it could be maybe a composition that's laid out in a square format, or even studies or portraits, maybe studies of animals, maybe that I can do, or close-ups of animals. I can do that kind of drawings on this format of paper, square format. and also can't do a full spread, so I would have to keep it to a square, so each individual sheet would have, you know, drawing on each page. It won't be a full spread. That's what I found for using a square sketchbook. This is the first actual, you know, square sketchbook that I've kept as a sketchbook. I have got a square book that I've created for my art journal, but art journaling is different to my drawing and painting. So in this case, with the drawing and painting, I think a square sketchbook does have its limitations, especially one that has got the spiral bound, or it has a spiral spirals in the center and the pages are separate, because I can't have the full format on the full book, and also it has to be a square format. But with a watercolor sketchbook like this, I think it's, you know, perfect for you to use any medium in it. It's a very thick paper. I can use all my mediums, from gouache to acrylics, watercolors. I can use color pencils, pencil, ink, you know, anything. You can use paint, anything you want to in the sketchbook, and it'll be able to handle that amount of, you know, water. We're working wet in wet techniques. I think anything will work with the sketchbook because it's such thick paper, and it is a watercolor paper. With all watercolor paper, you are able to get that, you know, ability to work with mixed media, and I think it can handle that. So that's a good thing about this one. Only problem for me I found is that I'm limited to what I can create, because I have to create in a square format, and I cannot have full spreads on both pages. That's the only issue, but that's, in my personal opinion, that's my issue. But you may not find that as an issue. So as I said, I'm just giving you my opinions, and this is just what I think. You can decide for yourself what works for you and what you prefer. But that's what I found with a square sketchbook. I would keep this mainly for compositions that I can create in a square format, as well as for maybe studies or close-ups or portraits, or maybe studies of animals, the close-up of an animal, or maybe just a certain still life maybe. I think that's what I would use the sketchbook for. Now, like I said, I'm going to be using multiple sketchbooks. I usually have about 3 sketchbooks or so going on at once, but I will be having a few different ones now for different mediums as well. You will see as I progress through the video, but that's what I would use this kind of a sketchbook for. Now, the next sketchbook that I've got is also watercolor, but these are actually my favorite sketchbook that I've come across so far. I do like this paper a lot, but because of the square format, it's a bit restricting to me. But I do love the Hanamil watercolor book. Now these sketchbooks, this is the landscape version, and this is the portrait version. Now the landscape version, I think, is the one that I'm going to be trying out. I've never used the landscape version, but the portrait version I've used a lot. I've completed a couple of them already in the past couple of years, and I really love this paper. It is a watercolor paper, and it is textured. It's got a fine grain texture to it, and it is 200 GSM, so it is able to handle anything. You can do multiple layers on here. You can do, you know, wet in wet techniques, use acrylic, gouache, color pencil, watercolors, you know, ink, graphite, charcoal. I've used this paper for all different mediums, and it can handle all of it. So I really enjoy this paper. I think it's perfect for mixed media as well. I think it's, you know, for layering everything, it works perfectly. Now I normally use the portrait format, which I can use for, you know, a full spread or double spread on both sides. And sometimes I can, you know, draw something on one side, or I can do individual sheets. But I like it because I can do the full spread on both sides. So that's what I like using this one for. And also the individual pages with some artwork. So I think that's really something I enjoy using this paper for. I am going to be using this particular one, which is the landscape version. Now the landscape format can be a bit challenging as well, but not necessarily, because you can use it like a portrait. You would use a portrait sketchbook. Only thing, you can't have it flipping over this way. So you can have it this way, and you can have, you know, your artwork done here, the next page done here. You can have sometimes one page with this landscape over here, or maybe something else done here. But I also, what is intriguing me is to have some long spreads, like really long spreads. So they go from one page to the next, maybe of some really long landscapes, and then also a composition that can go from top to bottom, from one page to the next. So I think that'll be interesting to have some artwork that and compositions that can work in the sketchbook. So this will be a challenge to me to use a, you know, landscape format for that purpose, to get those unique compositions in. But as I say, this is my favorite, and I always will use a portrait sketchbook, because I think this is really the perfect sketchbook for me. Although there are many other sketchbooks available on the market, like I said, these are the only ones that I've been using that I've enjoyed, and I just want to talk about them a bit. So the next one that I've got is a nostalgia sketchbook. Now this sketchbook as well I've used in the past. Now these two are A5 size, and this one is an A4, so it's double that size. Now the reason why I would use this sketchbook is, firstly, this is a Hahnemuhle nostalgia sketchbook, and it is 190 GSM sketchbook paper. Now this paper is actually, or sketchbook is meant for you to use with pen and pencil and ink, but I have used this paper for many other mediums. I've used it for gouache, I've used it for watercolor, I've used it for inks, color pencil, I've done layering. You know, you can use it for a lot of different mediums, pencil, everything. And I haven't had any issues. I even used acrylic in it, and I've had no issues with it. The only thing I would advise you that if you do use any wet media, try to limit the number of layers you do apply to the paper. And if you are applying multiple layers, try to limit the layers and let the layers dry. Because if you do overwork a layer of paint in there, or too many layers, or too wet layers, or wet in wet, you can damage the paper. So that's the only thing, but it doesn't go through the sheets. Even acrylic paint, you can paint on this paper, it has no issues. So that's why I like this paper, because I can use it for mixed media. And another reason why I wanted a larger sketchbook was something I can use for larger drawings or paintings. Like with these sketchbooks, I believe they only come in A5. I haven't found them in the larger size. So I have to resort to using this one for the larger paintings and drawings that I want to do. So that's why I've got an A4. I've also completed an A4 as well as A5. I've completed a size like this of this paper. So I have used both sizes, and I've had I've had no issues with mixed media, and I've also had, I could create different compositions with that size. But I'm going to be using most likely this one only for larger paintings and drawings, and then I'll be using my watercolor for the smaller ones. Then I've also got a smaller size Hahnemuhle nostalgia sketchbook. Now this is the A6. The reason why I would like a sketchbook that's smaller like this: smaller sketchbooks allow you to do a lot of paintings or drawings quickly, so you don't have to spend that much time. So it allows you to do more art and also to work quickly, and you can also have spreads in it. So you can have a spread, double page spread. You can have a portrait format spread. You can have a landscape. You can even have a double spread this way. So it allows you to work in different ways. But I think I would use this, or I'm going to be using this for a lot of quick paintings and drawings. Something that doesn't take a lot of time, when I want to just quickly get an idea down and not have to spend too much time thinking about what I'm doing or have too much of detail. I can use the sketchbook because it's much smaller, so I can get a lot done in a short amount of time. And then another sketchbook that I've got, which I've used a sketchbook that's similar to this as my first sketchbook, and this one you can only use with pencil and dry media. And this is a Hahnemuhle sketchbook 120 GSM. Like I said, I had another brand which was a cheaper brand that I found, just a regular sketchbook, and it is a very, very thin. You can see the paper is like a beige cream color, and it is a very, very thin paper. So I wouldn't recommend you using any wet media in this kind of paper. This one feels a little better quality than the one I previously used. Let me get the one that I previously used and I can show you. Okay, so this was my very first sketchbook that I completed, and this sketchbook was a very cheap sketchbook. It wasn't something expensive. I don't even know the brand. There's no brand on it or name of it. But this sketchbook was a very, very, very thin paper. It's similar to this paper, very, very similar. Although I do feel that the Hahnemuhle one is a little smoother with less texture, and it is a little thicker. So this one was very, very, if you felt it, it was a very, very thin paper, and it was also very, textured. It had a texture to it. So I think compared to the Hahnemuhle, I think this, and like I said, this was a very cheap sketchbook that I had. It's very cheap. Just very, was something I bought, just a regular book just to use. I did use watercolor. I did try using watercolor, but as you can see, it does warp if you try to use wet mediums in it. That's why I said I would prefer you not to ever use in a regular sketchbook like this, a wet mediums. This is the Honeymeal one, is obviously more expensive than the regular cheap sketchbook that I purchased, but this one is a bit thicker, the paper, and smoother. So maybe wet mediums, if in limited amounts, may be able to work with it, but I would highly recommend using this for just, you know, dry medium like pencil, color pencil, charcoal. I wouldn't say use it for a lot of you know, wet mediums like paints and gouache and watercolors. But I believe you can use it if you want to, but like I said, I wouldn't try using that for this. With this paper, this one is a little thicker than the very cheap books that you get, and it's smoother. So I think you can get some better results maybe with some wet media if you want to try, but there will be warping if you do use wet media, and it may go through onto the other side of the page. So just bear that in mind if you are trying to use wet media in here. But I would personally, I would use this only for my sketching, drawing. Like for me, I'm going to be using this for my sketching, thumbnails, you know, my thumbnail sketches, planning, some studies, doing some value studies. I think that's what I'll be using the sketchbook for. But yeah, it's just a regular sketchbook. Like I said, this is the Honeymeal brand, but you can get regular sketchbooks for very cheap, and you can get them, you know, at very affordable prices. This one is a little thicker than this one that I've used in the past. As I said, I don't know what the brand was. I don't know what the name of the brand was, but it was a very you know, cheap sketchbook that I used. I did use this for my 100 Heads challenge. You see, you can use fine liners and all fine. It doesn't go through the page, so that's a good thing to remember. This one is starting to fall apart a bit. But yeah, I did a lot of drawing with pencil, color pencil. You know, I did try using watercolors here and there, and you can see with the watercolors you do get warping. You can see with the page there is warping with the watercolors. So if you don't mind that happening, then it's fine. You can use a little bit of watercolors, but I wouldn't recommend it actually for watercolors. Although you can use, you know, I could draw on the other side, but that warping does happen to the page on both sides, and sometimes it can go to the other pages. So yeah, this was my you know, ballpoint pen works fine. You can see ballpoint pen works fine with it, and it doesn't go through on the other side. This one as well doesn't go through on the other side. So you can use pen, a regular ballpoint pen, fine liners, but nothing with too much of ink, like maybe a dip pen that would go through the pages. But yeah, a regular sketchbook, that's perfectly fine just for ink, like your ballpoint pen, fine liners, and then using dry media. I think dry media is perfect for these. Pencil, charcoal, the color pencils, I think you can work perfectly. There's a lot of different brands of sketchbooks and a lot of different types of sketchbooks. The weight of the paper is important depending on what mediums you're using. So if you are planning on using you know, something, you need something that's not too heavy weights, like 120 GSM is perfect if you're going to be doing just sketching and drawing, pencil, pen, and ink. Using a bit of, you know, dip pens and using bottle inks, then I would highly recommend something a bit more thicker, maybe like the 190 GSM, which is the Honeymeal that I'm using, the Nostalgia sketchbook. That's perfect for using that, and you can use wet mediums in that sketchbook, and it doesn't really warp the pages. If it does warp it, if you do too many layers, it'll be very little. It won't be that much. So let me just show you, for example, this is the Honeymeal Nostalgia sketchbook. So this is the sketchbook I used for my animal habitat series. So you can see I did all my animals for the animal habitat series in here, and I did this just using the Intense pencils, and then also, you know, I did a lot of other drawings like pencil drawings as well. I've done paintings with watercolor. This is with the Intense, and then I've done watercolor paintings, ink drawings, you know, doodles. I've done watercolor and ink paintings, and you can see it can handle a lot. And then ink paintings, and you know, all different things. I did this with ink, bottle inks, and you can see I did watercolor painting, and there's no real, you know, it doesn't come through the page really, and it doesn't you know, warp the page. At this point I was only painting on one side of the sketchbook until I started doing artwork on both sides. But you can see it has very minimal warping for the page, and but this was a real, you know, I did a painting on here, so there was very little bit of warping really for the page. But yeah, that was a nostalgia sketchbook. Then I got a smaller Hanamil nostalgia sketchbook, which is this one over here. This was the one I just recently completed, and you can see the, you know, the artwork. I've done acrylic. This is with acrylic paint pens and paint markers, ink, watercolor. I've used all different mediums in there. I've done stamping, painting, you know, gouache. I've done all different mediums in the sketchbook, and I've had, you know, no issues with this. I mean, I've done detail paintings with watercolors and, you know, acrylic paints, and I've had no issues with this sketchbook. So you can use a sketchbook for a lot of different things, and you'll be really happy. It doesn't have any, I don't have any issues with this sketchbook. Then the other one I just want to show you is my watercolor book. Now the Hanamil watercolor book is meant for watercolors, and I've used them for a lot of different, you know, paintings, and, you know, it was, I did acrylic paintings as well, gouache. I've used it for, there's acrylic again. I've used it for watercolors and added color pencil layering, and I've had so much of, you know, details I've done with these paints, and I've had no issues with them. They've just, I mean, I did pen, this is ink work, and this is done with the pen, with the watercolor paper. It actually helps to give me a bit of a texture, because, like I said, it's got a fine grain texture, so it really helps for that. And then on the other side, I've got more ink drawings, and you can see on this paper when I did like a full with ink, with the bottle ink I used, if you go on the other side, nothing shows through, and you've got you know, I got another painting on the other side. Did more watercolor paintings. This is a gouache painting I've done. So you see, you can do a lot of different things in these sketchbooks, and it can handle the layering, it can handle the ink, it can handle the paint. So I highly recommend this sketchbook. This one is my favorite sketchbook by far, the Hanamil watercolor book. This is, to start off, I would say, if you're using different media, I would say an A5 would be perfect. Don't go for the larger one, because it can be overwhelming and intimidating. So go for the A5. I think this is a perfect size, and also it's a perfect size for you to use, to create in, and you can create whatever you want in it using any mediums. So I think this is a nice one. If you only work with, you know, pen work and ink, pencil, then you can just go for an A5 size of this book. This is the larger one. You can go for the size of the nostalgia sketchbook, and you can get all your ink work down in it, pencil work down as well. If you are looking for something that's and this one you can use other mediums in there as well. But if you are looking for something strictly for pencil and ink, I would say this one. However, this is a good one to start off with if you're practicing and you're learning. I think this is a one that you can invest in, and it's not going to be feeling like you are really using a very precious book, because it didn't cost a lot of money. So remember, no page is wasted. Art you need to create. So sketchbooks are always fun for you to learn in. So I would highly recommend using your sketchbooks however works and suits you. But this is just my opinions of which sketchbooks I like. So I would always recommend this one. But like I said, you don't have to use this. There's a lot of other brands. I think this is a starting point for a beginner that's working mainly in pencil and dry media. I think this is your way to go. And then if you want to go out different mediums, then you could try out the Hanamil, or just get yourself a watercolor book, because this one you can use anything in it. So I guess that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful. I hope this video can maybe give you some inspiration and give you some ideas of what you can use your sketchbooks for. This is how I use my sketchbooks. By all means, use it the way that suits you and how you want to use it. But this is how I use my sketchbooks, and you don't need to use these particular brands. These are just the ones I use. But like I said, a watercolor sketchbook or mixed media sketchbook is fine for all different medias. And then mediums, and then if you want something more for ink, then you would go with the one that can more be for ink and pen and pencil, and then something for just sketching. This kind of a sketchbook, a regular sketchbook, can be fine. So once again, thanks again so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to like and share. It really helps the channel out. Also, if you'd like to see other videos like this and other art content I put up on my channel, then you could consider subscribing. Don't forget, if you do subscribe, to hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified as soon as my next video is uploaded. So thanks again for watching. Till the next one. Bye.